Hello there, welcome back to Ukrainian Media Podcast. I'm Olena Solodovnikova, and I'm excited to be joined by an Armenian journalist and former advisor of the Prime Minister of Armenia, Arsen Kharatyan. Hello, Arsen.
Hi.
Arsen, Armenia is ruling civil contract party led by Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan has secured a narrow parliamentary majority with 49% of vote, cementing the country's shift towards Europe and away from Russia. But Russia openly interfered in Armenia's electoral process, attempting to bring about change in government. How exactly did it happen, and why did it fail?
Well, it has indeed been quite crucial parliamentary elections in Armenia on June 7th. Probably one of the first times, if not the first time, when the country was deciding not only about its domestic affairs, but also its geopolitical future, uh, with the current ruling party adopting a law about European integration last year. As you mentioned, yes, we have seen various cases and directions where we saw clear intervention from Russia that began from online and media-based narratives that Russia was pushing, often completely fake and baseless, trying to impact the people. On the other hand, we've also seen uh, elements of informal embargoes on Armenian goods. In the last couple of days, Russia banned some of the produce that Armenia would initially export to Russia, starting from flowers, ending with several big industries such as mineral water, sparkling water, Jermuk, and Armenian cognac. So these were the vivid or the very visible elements of how Russia was putting pressure on the Armenian voters. But as we saw, in the end of the day, the ruling party received the majority of the vote, which after the redistribution of the vote, which went to the parties that did not reach the 4% benchmark, will get even greater. Three parties will be in the parliament. The current ruling civil contract will have a majority and form a government. It does not have a constitutional majority, but it does have a majority in the parliament, and two other parties which have been directly supporting the Russian agenda in the country.
Yes, could you elaborate on the stupid things which Russian pushed on your television? Because Armenia hasn't banned Russian television, unfortunately, but even that not helped him promote the Kremlin. But what they try to push?
Well, it's not just television, it is more online, and it's not
Uh-huh.
necessarily Russian television itself that was pushing this agenda. It's the political parties that have shown a pro-Russian direction that have been doing it domestically more than anything else. The narratives, most of the fake narratives that we've been hearing is about a possible relocation of or sort of arrival of 300,000 Azerbaijanis to Armenia. Uh, AI generated videos basically showing Armenian churches turning into mosques if this government comes to power. We have been seeing uh, generally threats about how Russia can economically completely demolish Armenia's economy. And on the other hand, of course, we have been hearing about the possible, including from Kremlin, we've been hearing about a possible Ukraine scenario, which Vladimir Putin mentioned in May. So there have been various multi-layered, if you wish, psychological and other types of, I want to call hybrid attacks, which were now we can clearly say were aimed at impacting the Armenian voter. But as we were analyzing this even before the elections, some of this behavior has become counterproductive for Russia. It had the opposite effect. In the end of the day, the one thing that I believe Moscow is miscalculating is the level of popularity or very low level of popularity for Putin and for Kremlin. So behavior like this basically had the counter effect.
Yes, and I'm wondering what role did the diaspora play in election, as well known that many Armenians live outside the country. Where exactly, and why was it not possible to play the Russian Armenian card?
Uh, well, first and foremost, the Armenian constitution does not allow voting from outside of the country.
Oh, really?
That is a big difference between Armenia and Moldova, for example.
Yeah.
There have been a lot of comparisons about how Russia would interfere in the Moldovan elections, also through the Moldovan diaspora in Russia or elsewhere. In case of Armenia, it is not possible since 2005 constitutional amendments. It is not possible to vote if you're not in the country. So physically, it would be impossible to bring that many people from Russia who would be able to vote. However, some people came. Some other people came from Europe and the US to vote also. So this has been an interesting sort of, we call it electoral tourism. A lot of people definitely came, and that on the other hand shows that the Armenian people believe that electoral democracy is functioning, is good, and their vote counts. So with different motivations, uh, thousands of people came to vote on June 7th elections. And I believe that this is a very, very important and a big victory for Armenia's electoral democracy in general.
Yes, and I just wanted to clarify some of your thoughts of the election campaign itself. And one of Ukrainian analysts wrote that Pashinyan didn't try to be likable on TikTok and Instagram. He posted shows, clips, played the drums, rode the bike. At the same time, he didn't talk about economic growth and didn't promise any specific reforms. In other words, he ran the campaign like a lifestyle blogger, not as a politician. So my question is, do you agree with this? And why is politics turning into the show, not only in Armenia? Is it what the society wants?
There may be a general trend of social media being often overused by politicians, not only in Armenia but elsewhere. However, yes, Pashinyan was extremely active on pretty much all possible social media outlets that are used in Armenia, targeting different groups, targeting different age, gender, and other groups. The how effective he was, I mean, the results of the elections are probably there to talk for themselves. But generally saying, there is a show element in any politics, and Armenia is not an exclusion.
Yes, I was surprised in that the poll conducted in May 2026 showed that young Armenians were actually less enthusiastic about the joining to EU than people of the most old generation, like 50 plus years. And how do you explain that? What is the reason?
Well, I mean, I definitely see some neglection from the younger generation in being involved in politics in general.
Uh-huh.
This is a very interesting and unique situation in that sense, which is, for example, compared to Georgia, is very different, where young people are quite active politically and have been protesting over the last 2, 3 years in Georgia. In case of Armenia, it's interesting how it's mostly the older generation that was more actively voting. And I think that because they also haven't seen many cases in their lifetime where elections actually mattered. At least 2000, before 2018, we've had skepticism about the electoral results, while now elections are actually the way to change a power or to have an impact. So I think there is a realization that participation among the elderly or older generation, that participation in the election is the only way to be able to impact the political processes and the future of the country.
Okay, just as you mentioned that Russia is actively applying economic and energy leverage to pressure Armenia, and now the gas prices are a question, and as you talk about vegetables and other things. What is and what extent Armenia is truly depend on this, and how quickly can you find new partners and where?
Um, Energy is one aspect and a big one, while the other types of so far informal sanctions, because there are no sanctions that are formally imposed. It is just some of the Russian sort of institutions that are in charge of the quality control have been talking about issues relating to some Armenian produce. This is nothing new. We've had this before, depending on a period and and issues that we had with Russia. This has been a leverage that has been used against Armenia, like many others in the neighborhood. Russia does use that in its politics. We've seen Georgia many times. Years ago, we've seen Moldova and other countries that have been going under or through this similar sanctional behavior of Russia. Now, with regards to natural gas, they have mostly been talking about raising the prices. So it's not about cutting off gas completely, but to raise the prices. We will see if they'll have a decision like this. I believe that this Armenian government is getting ready for different scenarios and has been consulting with its Western partners about possible sort of subsidy or support that can come from the EU and the US in case the sanction process goes viral. We've also seen some of the very particular produce that was originally going to Russia or had most of its sort of presence in the Russian market are being redirected to the EU. We saw Armenian flowers going to the Baltics. We've
Mm.
seen we've seen today that the apricot, which is a big part and a very short season now in June, will be going to Poland. And I
Mhm.
believe that we're discussing with not only member states but Brussels as well to find solutions of quickly being able to sort of appear in other markets. So I think this is not something that we are very surprised about. We expected things like this to come. The scale and the magnitude of these informal so far sanctions remains to be seen. But I do believe that there are alternative markets that will become available for Armenia if Russia decides to completely block or ban any Armenian produce in their country.
Okay, I just wanna jump to some sensitive topic, the sensitive issue for Armenia that lost of control of Nagorno-Karabakh. At the same time, Russia effectively refused to assist Armenia during the war with Azerbaijan. Was that the point of no return for your situation with Russia? Did the Armenians that Armenians perceive that as a betrayal of Russia?
Look, when it comes to Nagorno-Karabakh in particular, Russia's role, formal role in the process, had been as a co-chair country within the context called OSCE Minsk Group. That was the context where the Nagorno-Karabakh peace process was being discussed, where the US, France, and Russia were co-chairs. So formally, Russia's role in Nagorno-Karabakh could not have been standing by any side or taking any party. So the actual Nagorno-Karabakh issue, there is formally no blame to Russia when it comes to expecting support from them. But when it comes to Armenia proper, not Nagorno-Karabakh, after the war of 2020, where the Russian peacekeepers appeared in Nagorno-Karabakh, Azerbaijan continued attacking Armenian territory, Armenia proper, and this is where Armenia applied or requested support from not just Russia and not Russia bilaterally, but from the CSTO, which is, the
Mhm.
Russia-led military cooperation institution. And there was no response. And then their later response was, well, you don't have demarcation and delimitation with Azerbaijan, so we don't know if they actually attacked you or not. And this was sort of a turning point for a lot of Armenians also, where we saw that it's not, they could justify with different argumentations or with different sort of proofs of not being able formally to get engaged. But when it comes to being attacked and not getting any support, even when you have obligations based on various sort of documents and agreements, then you sort of decide to, do you understand that it is not only a non-starter to keep going with Russia when it comes to security, but oftentimes Russia itself can be a security threat. So there was that shift. There was that shift in the minds of Armenians, especially locals, bordering villages, where they saw how the Russian forces moved back and the Azerbaijanis came in. I don't think you needed to say anything else after that.
Yes, but why has Armenia frozen the participation in collective security threat organization, but not stopped it completely, quit it? Is it diplomatic move, or is it simply technically not possible to stop participation quickly?
I think it's generally quite a normal move in not immediately leaving the organization, but freezing and or lowering your participation, not paying the due that every member state does, not make sort of U-turns or big shifts, but sort of hang it there. And then once Russia moves on and makes other policy choices with regards to Armenia, next we may get out, or then we can discuss talking about are we staying at the CIS. So without making any bold moves, at the same time undermining the participation and the organization is, I think, a smart way of moving forward. Among other things, this is a tightrope walk for Armenia when it comes to diplomacy. We deal with Russia. You know better than anyone how aggressive Russian policy or politics can be. So I think the this government or has been trying to sort of move forward with fixing that there is a degradation of relations, but at the same time, without making any bold moves, in reality, terminating its participation in Russia-led alliances.
Yes, but actually, the first time that was the talks that Russia next target after Ukraine might be not Moldova or Baltic states, but Armenia. And how realistic is such scenario? What do you think?
I mean, I don't think people in Armenia for now take it very seriously. It's viewed as a threat. Obviously, this is Russia. It's unpredictable. They can make moves that one could not have imagined. But at the same time, I don't think that people are extremely worried about, oh yeah, Russia tomorrow is going to start a war, etc. We do, however, expect further and deepening sanctions when it comes to the economy, and this is the biggest challenge that we probably will have to deal with in the coming months and years.
Yes, but in Ukraine, we don't understand the real threat of Russia for the last hours of the full invention. And so if we imagine this attack on Armenia, what would Russia gain by attacking Armenia? Would it be able to gain full or partial territory of the country? How it will be?
I mean, I know, and as you said, while talking to my Ukrainian friends and colleagues, in the end of the day,
Yeah.
until the last minute, you never know. You always think that they will not, there's no way they can go that far, but in the end of the day, we see that they do. So that's why I'm saying we're not saying it's impossible. We don't see it happening anytime soon. So, Nova, first of all, there are several factual notes that need to be put out. So Russia doesn't have a border with Armenia. That's number one. There is a military base in the country, but it's 2 or 3 thousand people, and there is no way that military base can just open up and these people appear. This is a country of 3 million, and what are they going to do, right? And I'm talking about the unlikely scenarios that we may encounter. Armenia is much smaller than Ukraine size-wise. So to have an attack from a country like Russia, I don't think how long we'll survive if it's a full-scale military attack, right? And other bigger players in our region neighboring us as well. Russia doesn't have, if they actually decide or want to do this, they will always find a reason, as we've been discussing. But they don't have the argument that they brought, which I believe was just a justification for this illegal war against Ukraine, about Russians being, or Russian language or Russian culture being undermined in Armenia. That's simply not true. We're not even talking about NATO. So there are the arguments that we've been hearing with regards to Ukraine are not in place in case of Armenia. Now, however, they're going back to what happened in Ukraine after the Maidan in 2013, saying, well, this is exactly how they were doing back in the day in Ukraine. So Armenians actually want to go to EU, and that's why there could be a Ukrainian scenario. Now, how, what, and when, and why are big questions. But even if there is, let's say, an invasion and occupation of the country, what are they going to do? Like appoint a person? How are they going to maintain stability? Are they
Yeah, yeah.
going to create some kind of a military occupation of the country? How are they going to justify it? So these are things that are very difficult to sort of predict right now. Again, knowing that we have a rogue player at this stage, many different scenarios are possible, but I don't think, at least at this point, Armenians consider this as the most likely development in the near future. I mean, I don't think they have a base like that in Armenia. I don't think of people who will be cheering Russian tanks coming into the country. I don't think that's something that they would base their sort of policy on. We also don't. We are a very homogeneous country. 97% of the population, or 95% of the population, are Armenian. We don't have any significant minority, unfortunately, if you ask me. But it's not that society is divided between, oh, we want Russia here or else. People do feel threats coming from Russia. Some people, for good reason, don't want to degrade the relations with Russia. Um, there are also very vivid and clear pro-Russian politicians in the country with some base, but that's not significant.
Yes, and what can you say about the current state of relations between Armenia and Azerbaijan?
Well, we have a pre-signed peace agreement since August 2025 in Washington, D.C. What we've been hearing from the Azerbaijanis is they would expect or wait until these elections are over so they could know or would know who they're going to deal with. And in case of Pashinyan, there is the commitments with him. So I do hope there will be some positive movements on the direction of building institutional peace. In the meantime, we have already had a couple of positive examples of how members of expert communities and civil society have been traveling to each other's countries,
Mhm.
going across the border. We also have an intergovernmental commission that is working on the issue of demarcation and delimitation. This is the only case, I would say, probably in the world where two countries don't have diplomatic relations. The borders are closed. They have fought wars and don't have a peace treaty, but they do have an intergovernmental commission functioning. So
Mhm.
there are some interesting processes that have been taking place between Armenia and Azerbaijan, but we will see how quickly a positive progress can take place when it comes to signing of the peace treaty.
Yes, but another your neighbor is Turkey, and Armenia shares 330 kilometers border of two countries, and relations between Yerevan and Ankara the most strained by some historical events dating back of Osman Empire during the World War II. The mass killing of Armenians were carried out of territories as empire control. We talk about genocide. And to what extent there is historical events still serve as triggers for modern Armenians, because you know the situation in Ukraine and between Poland, and still we continue to talk about it and it triggered us. How about the situation between the Armenians and Turkey?
I mean, the Armenian genocide is not something that we even discuss. It's a fact for
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
really.
for the international community. It is an issue that Turkey has not recognized it, but it is not in the base of the relationships between Armenia and Turkey. Consecutive governments in Armenia, starting from 1990s, have adopted a policy of saying, yes, it's a fact, the Armenian genocide happened, but that's not the base on which we want to talk to Turkey. We are ready to discuss relations with no preconditions. Open borders, have diplomatic relations. We can discuss different topics in the meantime or in the process. So there has been communication between the two countries since 2022, I believe. The two governments appointed special envoys on Armenia-Turkey normalization. There has been talks about the possible partial opening of the border for third parties, third country citizens and diplomats. Last week, we saw Armenian businessmen going to Kars, that's the nearby town on the Armenian border, through the border. The bus went through a bridge. There is a river between the two countries, and which creates the natural border between Armenia and Turkey. We also saw a commission discussing building of a historic bridge of Silk Road era. And also, but these are symbolic steps. In reality, Armenia has been ready for this border opening or deblocking of Armenia's communications as this negotiation started. It is up to Turkey when they will decide to actually make a progress in this direction.
Yes, and you just opened the railroad for the imports of export from EU countries via Turkey. And will the Turkey become the new key strategic partner, or whether Turkey is the best to the EU for your country?
Turkey is not viewed as a path to the EU. We have our direct communication with the EU. We can have, when it comes to the markets, we have Georgia through which we actually can export things if the Turkish border is not open. Obviously, if it was open, it would make it much easier and better for the Armenian entrepreneurs and others to get to the EU markets. But that's not the only reason. I think Armenia-Turkey border opening would be fundamental, first and foremost, when it comes to already the security architecture in the region. The Russian military base in Armenia is right on the Turkish border, and the reason why that base is there is also because the border is closed. So once the Turkish border, Armenia-Turkey border opens, it will be the countdown for the Russian military base as well. And that's one of the big concerns that I'm sure Moscow has, because normalizing relations in the neighborhood will definitely diminish Russia's influence in Armenia and in the region as a whole.
Yes, I hope as well it will be completely stop this influence. And my last question is, as a former foreign policy advisor to Prime Minister of Armenia, what advice would you give him now?
Reform, make reforms, make sure that the countries, the people who voted yet for the third time for his party, that they deliver significant institutional reforms in the judiciary, significant changes in the new security sort of situation, as well as